A player versus player multiplayer game is a competition between several human beings who have agency to take whatever actions they wish within the game's systems. For a multiplayer mode to be fair and balanced, no player should be able to perform an action which invalidates a more skillful strategy. But flipping a coin is a fair and balanced form of competition. Good balance doesn't make a competitive game good on its own.
Alright, there's scavengers in the area. Stick close and keep an eye out.
The Last of Us Factions multiplayer is good because it's a fair and balanced competition, and it's The Last of Us. It makes smart alterations to the single-player mechanics so that everyone is put on an even playing field in a head-to-head context, but it is a good game for most of the same reasons that the single-player is. Gun combat is still extremely tense because of the slow fire rates on weapons. There's a low number of shots required to kill someone, but a high amount of time required to get all those shots out. The low ammo counts and small clip sizes are also ported over from the single player, and since bullets still run low so quickly, there's still a lot of close quarters combat. Close quarters weapons like bombs and molotovs are still crafted in real time, and crafting resources are still too scarce for any player to start relying on any single one of the close quarters weapons they can craft. The incredible sound design for the weapons is completely unchanged, and the way movement and aiming and everything else feels is identical. This time around though, it's 2 teams of 4 killing each other rather than Joel versus The Last of Us, and Factions does have to make changes to accommodate. There are significantly more weapons to choose from, and instead of being able to carry everything all at once, loadouts consist of a handgun, a long gun, a bonus weapon which you can purchase during a match if you do well, and up to 4 perks, which give passive advantages. Players don't immediately die when they're out of health, instead they go into a down state which gives teammates a brief chance to revive them. Instead of finding crafting supplies on random shelves and tables, they're now found inside supply caches dotted across each map. These spew melee weapons and the haberdasheries required to craft shivs, trip mines, molotovs and smoke bombs. The supply boxes encourage teams to sweep for enemies instead of camping in one spot, and since these little incentives are in permanently fixed locations, they become the most predictable and consistent points of conflict. It's impossible to know where exactly any one player will choose to go at any given time, but it's a pretty safe bet that players from both teams will sometimes end up at the same box at the same time. Listen mode is also carried over to Factions, letting you see enemies through walls if they're close by. It's now a very limited resource on a cooldown timer, and the only way to counter it is by taking the perk Covert Training Level 2, which will hide you from other players' listen modes, but only if you're crouching. See how when I go into listen mode here, the guy on the right gets highlighted, but the guy on the left doesn't, because he has Covert Training equipped. Listen mode is definitely one of the more unique things about the game as a multiplayer third-person shooter. This perspective often allows players to position the camera to see around corners while their player character is safe behind cover in a position that they couldn't even attack from if they wanted to. This can sometimes lead to balancing issues, but Factions makes that tactic irrelevant by just giving everyone the ability to see through walls. Knowing where enemies are doesn't always mean you can beat them in a fight, so if anything, listen mode makes the game more tense. So obviously Factions makes considerations for being a multiplayer game, but fundamentally it's still a game where you creep around collecting crafting materials until you either get the drop on an enemy with a stealth kill or draw too much attention to yourself and have to start shooting. If you enjoyed the player mechanics of the single-player mode but were one of the people who took major issue with the enemy AI, Factions might be a dream come true because it preserves a lot of what made the single-player great, just this time the enemies are actual other people who want to win. In theory. Outplaying other human beings is often just inherently more satisfying than the alternative, so Factions benefits from that by default, and naturally it's also infinitely replayable because the strategies used by the players change with each match. The ultimate measure of a PvP multiplayer mode is whether all of the possible strategies are interesting for players to either execute or compete against. How compelling are all the interactions between all the mechanics? And this is a bit beyond me. If I really wanted to evaluate an entire multiplayer mode on whether its rules and mechanics create interesting situations, that would be a matter of looking at all the individual elements and comparing them to each other down a list, while saying why each matchup is fun. For example, in factions, a shotgun and a rifle is an interesting matchup because the shotgun is a one-hit down at very close range, but the rifle is a one-hit down with a headshot at any range. This means that if a shotgun user gets close to a rifle user, the rifle user can still win, but they have to be quick and accurate, whereas the shotgun user only has to be quick, which makes for a compelling and tense scenario. So I can tell you that the matchup of the shotgun and rifle leads to at least one interesting head-to-head scenario. If I judged all the matchups between just the weapon types like this, I'd be listing off 351 scenarios and wasting hours of your time like a video essayist. I have to know my limits, and since I haven't tried using every mechanic in factions to counter every other mechanic, I can't say whether all of the strategies match up in interesting ways. What I can say for sure is that not every player has equal access to all of the strategies. The game has a significant amount of paid DLC, and not just cosmetics, loadout options. Primary weapons, secondaries, the bonus weapons you get by scoring kills, and a bunch of perks. The DLC mechanics try to be well balanced with everything else by introducing strategies which are different without being better. But when an enemy jumps in the window here, I chuck a bomb at him, but it goes wide, so I sprint out the back hoping he doesn't shoot me, and then I go into a crouch and start circling back around into the building. And when I take a look in listen mode, it looks like he's following me, so I clench, sneak up behind him, hoping he doesn't turn around, and shank him in the neck.
Nice.
I had Covert Training 2 equipped, so when I was crouch walking, I wasn't visible in that guy's listen mode. The other perk I combined with that was Agility level 2, which meant I could crouch walk very quickly. Those two advantages cost me 8 out of 13 loadout building points, which is maybe a fair investment to get those benefits. But the problem is, Agility is a paid DLC perk. I paid to sneak up on this guy that quickly. Whether I could beat him anyway or not doesn't matter. The reality is I paid to use this particular strategy to win this fight. If I hadn't had agility, he might have turned around before I got close enough to kill him. And if he had been in my place, then since he doesn't own the DLC, he could not have made the same play. I think this is the problem with having paid DLC perks like agility. In a competition, restricting access to any strategy at all for any reason is a sort of unfairness. It's different from imbalance between the mechanics, but it's unfair because each player is playing in a different possibility space. Perks exist in factions to provide passive advantages, obviously. Agility lets you move faster while crouching, and there's one which gives you 50% more ammo in every ammo pickup. These are passive buffs to your character's abilities or resources. You can move faster, or you get more ammo. That other perk I had during the shanking, Covert Training 2, is a base game perk, not DLC. So anyone can spend 3 loadout points to hide themselves from listen mode when they're crouched, which makes it a passive nerf to other players. Where agility is you can move faster, Covert Training is they can't see you. It is in fact the only perk which works this way. It is the only way to nerf an ability another player has without fighting them. Covert Training is an optimal strategy because 1, what it does is just very helpful, and 2, there is no way to counter it when someone else has it. The best you can do is just take it yourself as well. Let's pretend for a second that Covert Training makes the maximum possible negative impact on the possibility space of the game. The worst case scenario for an unbalanced mechanic is that every single player has to use it or they stand no chance. Factions has 79 non-DLC loadout options. So if every single player had to use Covert Training, then the number of perks and weapons you could choose from when building a loadout would be effectively reduced to 76. Because there are 3 tiers and look, just believe me. 76 is 4% less than 79. So in this version of Factions where covert training is the least balanced perk of all time, and everyone always uses it, the players would be 4% more sure of what they're up against. A problem that affects 1/25th of something is an amount that's noticeable but usually not catastrophic. Certainly not in this case where the game is a deathmatch and the unbalanced thing is not a weapon. I think covert training is worth complaining about, but it's also the only mechanical balancing issue I can find to complain about in a game with 79 loadout options. Of course, there are also 17 maps to consider in that. A balanced PvP map should not have positions which give a player an unreasonable advantage over players who are positioned somewhere else. The usual example of this is an easy camping spot, which is anywhere on the map where every possible angle of approach can be viewed within one camera position. In a small room with only one entrance, it's possible to keep the entire doorway in view at once, so a player inside the room can cover every angle that an attack could come from. It's just too much of an advantage over players who are trying to attack that position from outside. But think about the actual considerations that have to go into this. It means designing a level around the game's FOV. You've got to avoid camping spots where everything important can be seen all at once within the game's viewing angle, but you still want variety between spots with lots of sightlines and ones with only a small handful of them. It must be a spatial planning nightmare. Factions does have the odd camping spot, but they're clearly intended to be used when you're the Last of Us, because they're usually placed right at the far ends of the maps. It solves the camping problem by just making it really boring to camp there. No one is ever going to accidentally run across you all the way at the back, or bother looking for you if there are other players drawing more attention. Map design also needs to avoid overly obtuse geometry which could obscure the player's knowledge or ability to play effectively. By this, I pretty much just mean that kills should only happen if a player is genuinely exposing themselves, which, Factions understands fine. There aren't any lucky cross-map sniper shots happening milliseconds after you spawn here, unlike some games. When you do die, the camera swings toward the killer, so you're given a chance to learn what sightline your position was exposed to. But if you get killed from across the map by someone who quickly ducks down behind cover, the camera will pivot to show nothing. This is one way that kill cams from the enemy's perspective serve as a teaching tool in other games, by providing a demonstration of exactly how you're getting owned. In theory, it is the goal of a multiplayer map to ensure that every possible position encourages interesting gameplay scenarios from every possible angle of approach and with every possible arrangement of players. This is not really a quantifiable goal. You have to be like, how does the game play out when the player is here and an enemy is here? When the player is here and an enemy is here? Here and here, here and here. It's an impossible thing for a person to consider because the possibility space is infinite. Map designers have to build a potentially viable map based off their prior experience, then brute force all the possibilities and edge cases with thousands of hours of playtesting and then extensive data logging of public matches after release. Informed by all that smoke testing, patches can make any tweaks that are necessary when outliers show up in the data. Like, if 70% of all kills on the high school map are from the exact same position, that's probably evidence of a balancing problem. And if, 0.1% of kills take place in the building at the back, then that's probably evidence that the layout of that room isn't fun to play in for whatever reason. I haven't tried every tactic from every position on every map, of course, but it is possible to talk more broadly about the overall design emphasis of individual maps. For example, the beach map has a lot of open space with long sightlines. When an enemy chucks a bomb here, it stuns my teammate Punk Duck over there, so I pop out of cover to get a bead on him while my teammate Artoria runs up on him as well, and we both put him down together, but I'm quite exposed where I am, so I take a quick look in listen mode and then run for more cover, but I get down from behind by another enemy who's shooting at all of us, so my teammate Boyo comes and heals me, but the enemy takes out Punk Duck and moves up to the position where I just was, and I desperately need to heal, but I don't want to abandon my teammate, so I try to get a bead on the enemy, but since Boyo's covering, I go to collect some supplies for healing, but just as I'm picking up all the junk, another enemy starts shooting Boyo, not knowing that I'm very good at video games.
One less straggler to worry about.
That last guy was facing one direction to attack one player while getting killed from another direction by another player. In fact, just about every player in that scenario took some damage from a direction other than the one they were facing in. Open space encourages players to attack from longer range, but when they do, they're also exposing themselves to attacks from several different directions. In contrast to this, the hydroelectric dam map is very cramped in the main choke points. Lots of blind corners to hide behind, and such short sight lines that you're usually right up in people's faces while you're shooting them. When I see Boyo chucking a Molotov at Phantom here, I guess all the enemies must be down the other end, so I start running in that direction, but then this guy brings a flamethrower around the corner, and just take my word for it, a lot of my deaths on the dam had me facing my killer and seeing exactly how I was being killed as it happened. I would certainly argue that such a claustrophobic layout is definitely an encouragement to play recklessly and go in for the kill. Since cramped spaces have so few sight lines, you primarily expose yourself to the enemies you specifically intend to. This is not to say that the dam has no open spaces, or that the beach has no enclosed spaces, but they clearly have a different emphasis in their design, so they each suggest different strategies more strongly. Each map encourages players to consider more of the game's possibility space. Factions maps are consistently high quality, but they are multiplayer shooter maps. They aren't surprising. Remember, Factions is good because it's a fair and balanced competition, and it's The Last of Us. And The Last of Us isn't good because it does any one fascinating new thing. It's good because no other game has this exact combination of third-person combat, weighty controls, stealth tactics, real-time inventory management, detective mode, and brilliant level design. Despite how good Factions is, it lacks a unique selling point for the same reason. It's an unfamiliar combination of very familiar elements. It's why I spent 4 years trying and failing to write this frigging video. It's hard to argue for the game using specifics. Factions is good because it's The Last of Us and it's a fair and balanced competition between human beings. It is at the same time almost identical to the single player and infinitely different because it's multiplayer. Factions plays like a lot of games, but no games play quite like Factions.
Wow, Ed, I guess we truly are The Last of Us multiplayer.
Anyone who hates Infamous 2 is a fucking pedophile.